It's time for the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
On this edition of the Kirby on Sports Podcast, breaking down Week 3 of the NFL for you, along with some exciting matchups. Atlanta blowing another lead to Nick Foles and the Chicago Bears. Could Dan Quinn be on the hot seat? A wild one between Seattle and Dallas, Kansas City and Baltimore, and so much more. Plus, a recap of the Stanley Cup final between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Dallas Stars. All that and so much more, but before we begin, we would like to thank our brand new sponsor at Regroup Building Services, specializing in custom homes, remodels, additions, and so much more. If you're looking for a new place to call home or just need repairs on your current home, look no further. Regroup Building Services has you covered. Make sure you check them out today at www.regroupbuildingservices.com. Once again, that's regroupbuildingservices.com. We do the honeydews that your honey don't. Make sure you tell them Josh sent you. We are also sponsored by PM Plus Reserves, now expanding their territory to serve the I-81 corridor from Hagerstown, Maryland to Stanton, Virginia. All right. It's time for another edition of the Kirby on Sports Podcast, starting right now.
I'm glad you connected. This is Dave Johnson, voice of the Washington Wizards. You have connected to the right place because you are listening to my man, Josh Kirby, on Sports Podcast.
All right, welcome back to another week of the Kirby on Sports Podcast. You know me, I'm Josh Kirby. Alongside me this week, after a week off, Dan Demski. Before we begin, we are sponsored by PM Plus Reserves and Regroup Building Services. Big thanks, as always, to MPT Now Productions, Dave Johnson, and Productions by Q. Starting this episode off on sort of a serious note, as news breaks today, as we are recording this episode, the Tennessee Titans have come down with some positive COVID tests, ending up closing their facilities. What I've seen so far, there are 5 personnel members and 3 players who have tested positive for COVID. Plus, after more testing, 8 new positive tests. The Titans beat Minnesota by a point 31-30 on Sunday. So the Vikings, no positive COVID test from what I'm hearing. They have decided to close their facilities today in an abundance of caution. I couldn't agree more with that, but I just hope all the players stay safe. Looking ahead to next week, you're looking at Pittsburgh going to Tennessee, and the Tennessee Titans are one of those teams who are allowing fans this year. The Vikings are at Houston, and I don't believe Houston has fans, but there's a situation here, Dan, and teams are going to have to find a way to get this resolved. I don't see how the Tennessee Titans can start off next week and actually play this football game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really don't think there's any way around this. I think every team is, wants to play. They want to get the season in. But, the NFL, I think, in a way, had to prepare for this to happen. Anytime you're in a situation like this, we never experienced an NFL season in the middle of a pandemic. nothing like this ever. At least in our lifetimes, and I think people would say just throughout history. So, this is really difficult. So now, like you said, it's very unlikely that Tennessee plays next week. I don't know if they've suspended the game yet, but they've certainly talked about doing that. And you got to start thinking about other teams too. Will we see more remote sort of stuff from other teams? Maybe not immediately, but it's something to think about. What is the NFL? Are they going to have to ramp up as far as masks and things like that? We've seen a lot of coaches and players. Well, of course, players aren't going to wear them when they're playing, but coaches kind of disobeying the mask rule and things like that. And it's kind of been nonchalant. We saw last week, coaches started to get fined for that sort of thing. But certainly you got to look at the other teams that the Titans either played or may have come in contact with, and other teams too. And there's going to be a lot of testing going on. And, I wouldn't be shocked if the Vikings have several players who test positive. It takes, the process is sped up as far as getting test results back, but it's still going to take probably a day or two before there's a final word on whether the Vikings have any positive tests or not. So certainly those two teams are going to be sort of on lockdown for, who knows, at least this week, I would be willing to say. So, but this is difficult. This is the first time we've seen this yet this year. And, I think for not having a bubble, I really felt the NFL had done a pretty good job of trying to make sure there was adequate testing. Coaches were wearing masks. But one thing you've talked about a lot is the social distancing, especially a lack of it between the players, between teams. So that's a bit concerning too. We've seen a lot of handshakes, a lot of pleasantries exchanged before and after games, just like it would be normally. But, this is such a difficult situation where, you have to enforce all those things, and I'm not sure if the Titans are guilty of, not obeying that. I think all teams have been so far. So this is something, again, the NFL might have to crack down on for the future. But it's definitely something to keep our eyes on. I think we're going to see more testing across the whole NFL. Of course, the Titans have a tough game lined up next week. That's going to be postponed most likely. And there's just a lot of unknowns, Josh. And I think that's the most confusing part of the story right now. We just don't know what's going to happen, week to week, much less day to day with this, with this COVID outbreak. It could be that the Vikings and Titans are the only teams affected, or there could be other teams affected. We just don't know. It's way too early to tell.
This just throws a big kink into everything because it's like, if they go ahead and reschedule this game, when are they going to play it? Like, the NFL operates on a week-by-week basis. You have Thursday, Sunday, in Monday night games, and it's like, where can you fit this in order for the teams not to get tired? Yeah, because if you're going back to back on games or something, like if you're playing rescheduled the game for, say, a random weekday,
right,
like Tuesday or a Wednesday. That's very rare. I've seen it happen, I think, once. If I remember correctly, it was the Bills and the Jets because of a snowstorm. But anyways, besides the point, it's very rare. But there's a lot of stuff that needs to get worked out to figure out what is the best solution if these teams have to reschedule.
Yeah, and another thing is we're only 19 days into the season. We've already have, at least one team with an outbreak. And like I said, I'm sure there's going to be more numbers coming in. I'm sure the Titans have more than 8 positives, I'd be willing to bet. And of course, the Vikings, I'm sure, will have a few as well because, they like I said, teams don't necessarily socially distance, things like that. So, it's just going to be really interesting, and the NFL is really under a lot of pressure here. Do you suspend? If things get bad enough, do you suspend the entire season? Do you keep going kind of with what you have? Do you go for herd immunity, which we've heard before from especially college athletics? I don't think that's necessarily the way to do things, but that's just my opinion. There's just a lot of options right now. This is just really difficult on not only the teams and of course the health and safety of the players, but it's on the NFL, because if the NFL continues to play, I think that could be, they're going to get a lot of flack and criticism for that, which I think some of it is warranted in some cases. But this is just really difficult, Josh. I don't know what the decision is going to be from the NFL. I think, as Adam Schefter tweeted today, it's just going to be sort of a day-by-day basis. The NFL is really going to have to, make and sort of change decisions if need be. So players and all involved are really just going to have to just, take it as it comes, I guess, right now. This is just unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah, so as I've been seeing in the reports on TV and other news sources, teams are taking it day by day and preparing to play unless otherwise stated by the National Football League. So that's the story there in Tennessee. Tennessee's offices are closed. Minnesota's offices are closed. We'll keep you updated at Kirby on Sports on Twitter as always. Once again, glad you're with us. I'm Josh Kirby. I'm joined with my contributor, Dan Demski. You can find Dan on Twitter at Dan the VT Man 97. Before we get into week 3 action, I'm just going to briefly jump off the NFL wagon for a second and say, Dan, the Virginia Tech Hokies pulled it off with 23 people not available. That's between players and coaches. Their new defensive coordinator wasn't even
there. Yeah.
So briefly, can you talk about the Hokies and some other college games you saw that were exciting to talk about?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was as surprised as anybody, I think, that Virginia Tech was able to kind of dominate the way they did. They had 300 rushing yards, not that many through the air, but when you run the ball as well as they did, and with the variety that they ran the football, that's going to be successful 9 times out of 10. So, I was very impressed with the quarterback play. Braxton Burmeister came in and played very well. Of course, Hendon Hooker was out, had an undisclosed injury that I think was discussed after the game. So Quincy Patterson and Braxton Burmeister, who joined the team last season but was ineligible to play, both saw significant playing time for Virginia Tech and really, kind of had that defense kind of off and confused for much of the game. I was very impressed with the defense as well. Forced, I think, 2 or 3 turnovers. I only got to see the game really in snippets, but I was very impressed. NC State is kind of a team that has been struggling a little bit here and there. So I've kind of had a feeling we would win the football game, but we really dominated in pretty much every area. And something I noticed that I know Justin Fuente addressed right after the game was the conditioning, and how it's just been very difficult for the team with the lack of any sort of spring practices and weightlifting and conditioning. They had a little bit, but not really enough to get their team ready to go full force, if you know what I mean. And of course, they didn't have any scrimmages either. So all those things considered, I think it was a very impressive win and a good start to the season. And I think they got bounced out of the top 25. I'd have to double check on that, but I read somewhere that they got bounced out of the top 25 somehow, some way. They got kind of screwed over in that fashion. But as far as other college games that I saw, the other game I really paid attention to was the Oklahoma-Kansas State game. Oklahoma, obviously the heavy favorite in that game, had a 2 or 3 possession lead coming out of halftime. It might have been 28-7 or something along those lines. 28-10, I think. Anyway, Kansas State just caught fire at the right time and put it all together and really had Oklahoma on their heels. And Kansas State kicks a field goal, or scores a touchdown rather, with time expiring, and ends up coming away with a huge upset, which they also beat them last season. So maybe they kind of have their number a little bit. 38-35 the final score. The impressive thing in that football game, Josh, was 17 unanswered points by Kansas State in the fourth quarter. They were down 35-21 going into the fourth quarter. So I think a lot of people thought, no, this game's over, man. This is terrible. So got to give credit where credit's due. Kansas State's offense really picked it up, and their defense really shut down Oklahoma when it mattered. And so I paid attention to that game. I also caught the Florida Ole Miss game, watched a little bit of that. Florida's just a better football team, quite simply. And that there's really nothing to write home about there. Texas and Texas Tech, got to see some of that game, a typical Big 12 matchup with a lot of points. Texas was able to fight them off in overtime. That was a really good football game. And really those were the only games that I got to see very much of. Florida State and Miami dominated that football game. And I think, again, kind of enters the talk of being the team to beat in the ACC. I think that's going to be a question all season, obviously. But that was just a complete domination.
It's very interesting, in my opinion, because some teams have been playing for a little while. Other teams playing their first college game on Saturday. Another game I saw, Pittsburgh over Louisville, 23-20. That was a back and forth shootout. But other than that, it's just very interesting in my mind that it's just conference to conference if they're playing or not playing due to COVID. So once again, another interesting scenario. How's the college football playoff going to look and everything like that?
Yeah, and of course we got to mention Mississippi State taking down number 6 LSU. I kind of had the feeling coming into the season LSU lost 7 or 8 players that were all drafted into the NFL draft, and of course that's very difficult to replace. And they really struggled throughout the game against Mississippi State, and especially defensively, a team that was so dominant last year. They fall in that game 44-34. That's a big upset early on in the season, but I just don't think LSU is nearly the same team that they were last year, Josh, and I think I'd like to hear your thoughts on that game as well.
Yeah, I mean, LSU going from the top last year and losing so many people into the draft, you're going to see some sort of regression. But Ed Orgeron as their head coach, I feel like he can make the right adjustments and give that team a chance to go out there and win more football games. But it's early on, their first game of the season. So
the SEC started I guess a couple weeks after everybody else.
It's an adjustment.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult for a while, like you said. I mean, and of course the Big Ten doesn't start for another month, so that's going to be something to think about too. The big Ohio State-Michigan game isn't until like December 15th, so about a month later than usual. So it's definitely going to be different this year. And like you said, the college football playoff, how is that going to play out with how are they going to do it to how, the rankings were when the season started with only, 3 of the Big 5 conferences playing. I guess 2 technically early on because the SEC was starting later. Of course, the Pac-12 is not playing at all, which isn't really a big loss anyway, to be honest with you. But that's going to be interesting too. How do they figure that out? How does that factor in? That's sort of one of those things where during the times we live in, things have changed a lot. Things have evolved. That's going to be interesting to see how, the committee sort of votes on that. So that's another thing, like you said, we keep our eyes on and see how they figure it out throughout the season.
That's college football talk. Now let's move on to week 3 in the National Football League. Dan, I really want to start off with something I really saw coming after okay Mitch Trubisky started having a touchdown and an interception. The legend Nick Foles comes in, throws 188 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. And Atlanta blows their third
Literally.
of the season. I'm sorry, but Atlanta, something's got to change. I think Dan Quinn needs to go because you cannot expect your team to perform well after blowing 3 leads. It's ridiculous. And credit to Nick Foles where credit is due. Matt Nagy has named Nick Foles the starter for next week's game. And this has just been something I have seen coming for a while now. I know a lot of Bears fans, and they just know that Mitch Trubisky cannot get the job done. And Nick Foles, I'm glad he's starting because he's finally getting that opportunity to start with a team and take them to the promised land, which is the Super Bowl. Winning a Super Bowl himself as a backup, that was historic. But I think it's time you give Nick Foles the reins to this Bears team. And for Atlanta, I mean, look at this here. Atlanta, you're up 6-3 in the first quarter, then 10-7 in the second quarter, 10-0 in the third quarter. Then you get shut out 20-0. That's unacceptable. I've seen it in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons, and then 3 times this season. Unacceptable.
Yeah, in back-to-back weeks with, last week was a 15-point lead against Dallas. And, of course, this week was a 16-point lead, 26-10 game. And, from what I can recall, the Bears didn't really start to come back until there was like 3 or 4 minutes gone in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, it's completely inexcusable across the board. But Dan Quinn, obviously, should bear the responsibility. Anytime you blow a lead like that, it's a lot of it's going to be based on bad coaching. There's been so much stuff said about this game, but like you said, the legend of Nick Foles. I mean, he seems to sort of come out of nowhere, and sort of just make an impact and just make a big splash, and that's exactly what he did in this game. And they seem to play a lot better with him behind center. There's a lot more confidence there. And you could see that on Sunday. It was just so weird, honestly, that the Falcons did it again. They have a history of doing this and already, like you said, 3 times this year, twice with big leads in the fourth quarter in the last 2 weeks. It's inexcusable across the board. They kind of got away from running the football. Anytime you have a multiple possession lead, you want to burn clock. I mean, didn't they learn anything from the Super Bowl when they kept trying to throw the football with Matt Ryan? They were unsuccessful. They turned the football over, and the Patriots got back in the game. Yeah, the same thing happened here, except it took only 1 quarter for the comeback to happen. So it's a mess down there in Atlanta. I really think if Dan Quinn loses this week, I think his tenure in Atlanta is over. And I think he's back to being a coordinator somewhere. I think he can be a good coordinator, just not all coordinators are meant to be good head coaches, which is a shame. Which is a shame because of what he was able to do when he first became the head coach of the Falcons. But too many times, bad decision making across the board. It starts with the head coach, and this loss is on him. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, I really think Dan Quinn's on the hot seat now. I think he's one of my early candidates for a coach to be fired early this NFL season. Yeah, like you said, it should be all on Dan Quinn because blowing a lead like that, it's absolutely unacceptable.
Yep, I agree.
Moving on. Man, what a whirlwind in this game. The Bills and the Rams. I talked last week with Carlos on the last episode of the podcast, and I was like, circle this game. This is going to be a good one. And it was. The Bills lost a 28-3 lead to the Rams. then got it right back at the end of the game. The Bills ended up winning this game 35-32. There was a questionable call towards the end of the game with an offensive pass interference that wasn't called on the Rams. The Bills and Rams fans weren't happy about it. And I saw the play, and I really couldn't tell in my opinion. But I mean, questionable call or not, this was a very good game. Jared Goff putting up 321 yards. Josh Allen putting up 311 yards. Allen with 4 touchdowns and Goff with 2 touchdowns. So a very, very good game. And I circled this from last week, and I cashed in my points there, I guess, my brownie points.
Yeah, just a classic case of 2 quarterbacks just throwing the ball around the yard and just having a great time. This was a fun game to watch, and you talk about Jared Goff. We've seen him over the years really play well. I think this was an important game for him because he kind of had a slow start in the first couple games. They were 1-1 in their first 2, obviously, but he needed a big game and he got one. The unfortunate thing for him is that Josh Allen had an even bigger game. So for the 4 touchdown passes, Josh Allen really is just fun to watch. He's just impressive. He's hard. First of all, he's hard to bring down. He's fairly mobile for a guy his size, and I mean he can throw the football, and he's got weapons. Cole Beasley, 6 receptions for 100 yards, led the team. But, I mean, he spreads the ball around too, Josh, and they have a lot of weapons. The Bills are, I think, the team to beat in the AFC East this year. As good as the Patriots have played, I just think that the Bills have too many weapons, and they also usually have a pretty good defense. They didn't really show it on Sunday, but heck of a comeback by the Rams. Just came up short. I think they got hosed at the end there. That's just my opinion. Watching it live, I was very surprised. But we've had so many last-second we've had so many pass interference penalties in the last few years that have been controversial to end the game, and that's another one I think you got to put up there. But still a good football game nonetheless. 2 really, really good football teams. And like I said, watching Josh Allen play is a ton of fun. That kid can throw it, I think, just as well as any young quarterback in the NFL. And a lot of people don't talk about him enough, I think, when you talk about young quarterbacks in the NFL and the future of their franchises. I think Josh Allen's near the top of that list, really.
Yeah, I really think Allen has a bright future playing in Buffalo. I've seen so far through these past 3 weeks of the NFL, teams win when they're spreading the football around. I just love to see a quarterback throw the football to more than one receiver for a touchdown instead of going to his favorite target. I love that, and I think that adds diversity and a unique style of gameplay to a team's arsenal when a quarterback can do something like that. Hence Russell Wilson. That man can spread the ball around too. I'm not saying they're in the same category, but still, I just love that.
Allen's not there yet. He needs a couple years behind him,
That's
his belt.
What I said.
No, I know. I was just finishing what your thought basically, but yeah, I agree. I think he's just fantastic, and like you said, he spreads the ball around just as good as any other quarterback in the NFL, and he's a good leader too. So I think they have the right guy for their future for sure.
Buffalo stays undefeated 35-32 against the Los Angeles Rams. You want to hear a funny story, Dan? 3 brothers TJ, JJ, and Derek Watt all were on the same field between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Houston Texans. Between the 2 teams, All three brothers were on the same field. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. And, it was funny, but I didn't laugh. So I was a little disappointed in you saying it was going to be a funny story, but that's okay. Yeah, man, it's amazing. It's history making, I don't know if that's ever happened in NFL history. I don't think it has. 3 brothers on the field at the same time, but those parents have to be extremely proud just to have one son in the NFL, but to have 3 and have them play each other. It's just insane. I mean, some stories just write themselves. Actually, hold on. This is the second game in the NFL in 93 years to feature 3 brothers.
Wow.
That's according to CBS Sports. So thank them for that little nugget. So I make sure I get my facts straight.
I just think it's funny that the NFL scheduled that game so all 3 brothers were playing on the same field, which is insane.
It is. And it's only the second time in 93 years. So there you go. There's your fun fact of the day.
Yeah, fun fact for the day. J.J. Watt actually tweeted a picture of him and his brothers on that field saying started in the backyard. I think that's just a legendary tweet. I actually retweeted it, and how you as little kids just start playing in the backyard, and now they're on an NFL field all together.
Exactly, man. It's just a dream come true for so many young people, and for them to be able to live out that dream. It's just really, really, really cool to put it into light terms. I think it's just really, really awesome. So
absolutely,
I'm excited. It's exciting for all them.
Yeah. Going into this game, Houston had the early 17 lead in the first half, and then they get shut out in the second half. Watson looked decent in the first half, but Big Ben, my man, 237 yards and 2 touchdowns. Pittsburgh comes back to win that game 28-21. And Houston's in trouble. They're 0-3.
Yeah, they played better this week than they did last week against Baltimore, but yeah, more issues not scoring in the second half. 21-17 lead at halftime for the Texans, and really no offense to be found in the second half. They get shut out 11-0. So that is extremely frustrating. And again, another coach who's on the hot seat is Bill O'Brien. And once again, the last couple of years we've been talking about him on the hot seat. I think if they lose next week, you got to consider he's on the hot seat. Even though, and this is something that's very difficult for their football team, is the start of the season. You play really 3 great football teams. The Kansas City Chiefs in week 1, which was a loss, of course, and then a loss to Baltimore last week, and then you have to go on the road to Heinz Field and play the Steelers. So that's one of the toughest starts to a season that I think any team has had. So we'll see if they can rebound from this. But they're certainly, the hardest part of their schedule is behind them now, and maybe they can start to put some wins together here.
Yeah. No, another coach. I don't feel Bill O'Brien as much, but
no, he's not as much. But I do think he's there because, there was, especially with last season, with him trading away DeAndre Hopkins at the end of last year, and some of the stuff that came out about his relationship with him and certain other players. It's just a thought. I think a good relationship between a head coach and a player is so important in the NFL and understated a lot of times that, I don't know what Deshaun Watson's relationship is with them or anything like that, but If he continues to lose football games, then I think he's going to be gone towards the end of the season. Now, I expect the Texans will wait till the end of the year anyway to make a decision one way or the other. I don't anticipate them to fire him. If they do during the season, I think they'll wait till the end.
That's 28-21 Pittsburgh over the Houston Texans. Next game on the list, the Detroit Lions get their first win of the season over the Arizona Cardinals. I found this sort of surprising.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray had 3 picks in this game, and Detroit, Matthew Stafford, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, I'm not really sure what to say here, but the Cardinals were looking great these first 2 games. Yeah, and you see Kyler Murray had 29 yards rushing. I'm not really sure what happened in this game, but I think Detroit really needed this game in order to build confidence because they have had a rough start to the season playing 2 division rivals, then going out west. So I really think this helped their confidence a lot. Another man I think who could be on the hot seat, we're talking about the hot seat a lot, but if the Lions do not have a good season this year, don't be surprised if Matt Patricia ends up on the hot seat.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's such a bizarre game, but the difference really was the turnovers. 3 interceptions, you're going to put your team in a very difficult spot. And even with those 3 picks, the Cardinals almost won the football game. So the Lions just played more mistake-free football. That's the bottom line here. And Kyler Murray had, as well as he's played to start the season, kind of a hiccup game here, and that's going to happen with a young quarterback. But the 1 pick he threw was taken back to like to his team's like 25 or 30 yard line. So you set your defense up with their backs to the wall. It's very difficult to not give up points. But this was a win that the Lions really needed. And you're right about Matt Patricia. A lot of criticism about the play calling, the execution, of course, the lack of making any changes to their offense. He's kind of hard-headed, and I kind of agree with you. I think there's a very difficult thing to kind of bounce back from for the rest of the season for the Lions. Their defense, I think, is pretty good. You force Kyler Murray to throw 3 interceptions, you're doing something right. So I think they might have to lean on them a little bit. Matt Stafford played well, Josh, 22 of 31, nearly 300 passing yards, and he had 2 touchdown passes. So he played very well. The former Washington footballer, Adrian Peterson, 75 rushing yards, 22 carries for AP. That's insane. But this is really one of those odd games, to say the least. Like you said, it's just bizarre that the Cardinals struggled in the fashion they did. But 3 interceptions is really going to put your team in a difficult spot, no matter who you're playing. And the Lions were able to just barely take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals just started to lose confidence after Kyler Murray's 3 interceptions. I think that was the narrative in this game. They kept it close to the end, but the 3 interceptions in a game, it's just not going to cut it. You cannot win games with that many interceptions. So, yeah, Detroit, they needed that win, but that's a 26-23 win. Lions 1-2, Arizona Cardinals 2-1. Let's move on to a much better game, excuse me. The Seattle Seahawks and the Dallas Cowboys. Russell Wilson is out here breaking records.
Yeah, he's insane.
There is no MVP vote for Russell Wilson, who had 315 yards and 5 touchdowns. 3 to Tyler Lockett, 1 to DK Metcalf. But Metcalf you got to speed up the Jets until the whistle is called. Speed up the Jets, and I'm referring to that touchback and Jay Hollister with a touchdown pass. So 5 in total. Still spreading the ball around, but Lockett with 3 touchdowns and 100 yards in that game. Dallas kept it close, but Seattle was just too much for Dallas to handle with all of Dallas's injuries and everything like that. Dak Prescott had 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So the defense played good for Seattle, and the big kicker in this game, only 61 total rushing yards by the Dallas Cowboys. You're not going to win a football game with 61 total rushing yards in Seattle, playing the Seattle Seahawks. Period. The end. The Seahawks were the most upper-handed team in this game, and it showed. Credit to the Dallas Cowboys for staying in this game and only losing by 7 points. But Seattle, hats off to Pete Carroll, hats off to Russell Wilson, hats off to Tyler Lockett, hats off to the entire team because they played a full 60 minutes, and this just goes to show you why Russell Wilson should be the MVP.
Yeah, you perfectly said. I really have nothing much to add to that. I will say that go back to the running for the Cowboys. You know, you say you have one of the best running backs in the NFL, but so far this season, Zeke really has been just, a letdown to say the least. 14 attempts, 34 yards. It's pathetic. It's just pathetic. And this is a team that the last few years has really relied on a run-first basis. This year, I think they have a little more talent. Michael Gallup is just insane. 138 rushing yards. God, my brain. 138 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Their receiving core is solid. It's just a matter of will Dak make a stupid throw or not a lot of times. And you really hit the nail on the head about Russell Wilson and just this entire Seattle offense. They are elite. And I think one of the top in the NFL. It'd be foolish to not give him a single MVP vote. I think there's so many great players in the NFL this year, especially the quarterback play. I know we're going to talk about Patrick Mahomes, of course, later, who I think is in a class of his own. But Russell Wilson's been doing this for several years. Just another fantastic game, and great quarterbacks are just enjoyable to watch, and that's really what that game was about. Russell Wilson just throwing absolute dimes, and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett were on absolute fire. Tyler Lockett, like you said, 3 touchdown catches, and DK Metcalf, of course, had 1 as well.
He could have had 2, but he didn't go into the end zone. Yeah,
had that stupid blunder there, celebrating too soon. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, I really needed Chris Carson to play better for my fantasy team, but it is what it is. Seattle was the better team coming in, Josh. I think that was the expectation, anyways, across the betting world. But give Dallas credit. They played solid football and really hung in there with the Seahawks. But I think in the end, Seattle's just too good. And, of course, the 2 interceptions really set the Cowboys back. And it was difficult for them to claw back into the game and tie the game up. And Seattle's just a great elite football team in this league. That's the bottom line.
I want to go back here to Dallas and the receiving core. I hate to say this being a Washington fan, but I'm going to say this. Dallas really has a future if these 4 receivers can stay healthy, and Michael Gallup, Ced Wilson, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, as a rookie, I've seen how he played. He plays tremendously well. And if these receivers can stay healthy and the Dallas Cowboys as a whole can stay healthy and get that O-line back to what it was and give Dak time and protection, you have weapons to throw on each side of the field. And once Dallas gets healthy and they get everything into place, I still feel like Dallas is just rebuilding after letting go of Jason Garrett, bringing in Mike McCarthy, still trying to implement some sort of game plan. Granted, like you said, they still do have Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. I'm not sure if that's an issue or not, keeping Kellen Moore back from when he was with Jason Garrett. But to my point, if Dallas can keep these receivers healthy and a full healthy O-line can protect Dak Prescott, in the near future, I think Dallas could be a team you need to look out for as explosive.
I think they could be now. I just think what's getting in the way is, again, the turnovers by Dak Prescott. It's just some of the throws are just inexcusable. And anytime you play a top echelon team in the NFL, top of the line team like the Seahawks, you cannot give them extra possessions. And we saw that in the game we're going to talk about later. So, yeah, it's just it kind of falls on Dak, and I hate to really blame the quarterback all the time. I think people tend to just use that as a cop-out, but I really think at the end of the day it comes down to him because, Dallas has insane weapons. You talked about all the receivers. And, of course, Ezekiel Elliott, who hasn't been the same this year. Maybe I wonder if he's battling an injury or something of that sort. But all the pieces are there for Dallas to be successful on offense. Their defense is, again, questionable. But they should be able to score in the 30s and maybe 40s every week. So, and I think, again, it falls back on the leadership of Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. The turnovers, like you said, that could I think I left that out. I didn't really think that was a big issue, but if Dak can limit the turnovers and just find his targets, I think that would help him a lot more. But 38-31, the final in that game. The last game we have on our docket, let me just briefly go over this, and Dan, I will give you the floor. 34-20, the Kansas City Chiefs play a dominant game. 385 passing yards for Patrick Mahomes and 4 touchdowns. Once again, spreading the football to 4 different receivers, even an offensive tackle towards the end of the game. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion, let me gather my thoughts here, but the Chiefs are, I think they are like 10 times better than they were after they won the Super Bowl. Like, this team is so creative and so unique. And Patrick Mahomes under center for this team, it's insane what he can do. He just underhand flips it into the belly of a tight end. He catches it and runs for a touchdown. Who else can design that better than Andy Reid in the Kansas City Chiefs? The Ravens, I did like what I saw from them, but I mean, only 97 yards from Lamar Jackson, 158 yards total. They abandoned the run. And I feel like once you abandon the run and try to pass it more, you're not going to end up doing well in that game. Lamar got pressured a lot, 4 sacks for minus 27 yards in that game. Chiefs all out, dominated 34-20. But I mean, hands down, this is one of the best teams I've ever seen. I mean, it's crazy. This team is even better than Seattle. Granted, they are on AFC and NFC, but still, this Chiefs team is the most creative, most smartest. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes can get the job done any way they see fit. If you want to throw it to an offensive tackle who reported as eligible, you can do that. I've seen them do that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do it again. And Patrick Mahomes, he looks great running the football too. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he looked decent in that game, but I mean, Patrick Mahomes can do it all. The running game for Kansas City didn't look great, but Patrick Mahomes compensated for that first, throwing smart passes, throwing the football around, and making plays where plays needed to be made. All in all, hats off to Kansas City. Like I said, hats off to Seattle. Another great football team and the most creative I've ever seen. Dan, I know this isn't the way you wanted this game to go, being you are a Ravens fan, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts on what you saw from this game.
Well, I think what we saw was just how big the gap is between great elite NFL teams and pretty good NFL teams. I think going into the game, a lot of people picked Baltimore to win that game. Rightfully so. If you just take a look at how the defense has played in the first couple of weeks, forced a lot of turnovers, and really played extremely well, got a lot of pressure on, Baker Mayfield in week number 1, and of course, Deshaun Watson last week. And there was a high confidence in this Baltimore defense. And, you got to give Kansas City credit. I mean, they just kept them on their toes and back on their heels the entire game. The Ravens almost looked lost, really from the onset. It was quite disappointing. I thought the biggest play of the game for Baltimore was outside of the kick return for a touchdown, which was really the only positive scoring play, and of course the late touchdown toss by Lamar. But the defense just couldn't get off the field. It seemed like every time Kansas City touched the football, and I would say they scored all but maybe 2 or 3 series. I'd have to go back and look at the drive chart, but everything they did seemed to work, and especially on third down, it didn't matter the distance. Mahomes just works his magic, and the Ravens were just left looking shocked, seemingly every time their defense took the field. Now, early on, when they were struggling on offense a little bit, and they really had no rhythm at all, they were punting the football, and their defense, their defense was on the field a lot. I think time of possession was straight up dominated by Kansas City, but they also scored fast. I think the killer for them in the first half was that last touchdown toss with about a minute and 40 seconds left in the half, which made it a 27-10 game at the half. That was killer, and it's tough to rebound confidence-wise after that happens, and they just were never able to. Defensively. On the offensive side of the ball, they, on the opening drive of the game, they drove right down the field, ran the football really well, and just did a fantastic job of, I thought, keeping the Chiefs honest. Anytime you run the football well, you do that to the opposing defense. And then after that, they got away from what got them there. Really, I mean, they threw the ball a lot with Lamar. They came back to the run later on in the game, but the offense was out of sync. You had some bad throws by Lamar. You had a lot of drop passes by the receivers. Everything that could go wrong for your offense as far as being out of sync. There was a touchdown that was dropped. There was a couple passes down the middle that were dropped. Lamar had some pretty bad throws. He didn't throw any interceptions. He had a fumble. Actually, I think it was 2 fumbles. I have to go back and check. But really, nothing worked. Mark Andrews, a guy who has such a strong connection with Lamar, they just weren't in sync all night. Only 3 receptions, 8 targets. Marquise Brown, same sort of thing. Only 2 catches, 6 targets. And it falls on both the quarterback and the receivers. And the offensive line wasn't helping things. And they really just got Lamar uncomfortable early, and he was never able to recover. And, of course, the criticism with him has been early on in his career, he can't win big games, Lamar Jackson. I think that's an honest criticism. I don't think you can just blame him. And last night I was pretty down about him. I'm sure you saw my tweets and my Facebook posts about his numbers, which were, you throw for less than 100 yards, you're not going to beat many teams in this league anyways. But really the play design was, I think, what was the biggest part of this football game. So it's extremely frustrating. Nothing worked on offense. When they made it a 27-20 game, I have to admit I had a little bit of confidence that the defense was going to be able to get a stop after that, either the series or the series before, when the Ravens defense was able to stop Kansas City on 4th and 2. I was surprised they didn't just take the points at that rate, but I guess they would have had to punt. Anyway, this was just, Kansas City was more prepared. They came out with a better game plan, and they exposed the Ravens defense, which is supposed to be their strong suit. So this is kind of a wake-up game, I think, for the Baltimore Ravens. Now people kind of see that you were exposed a little bit, and you have a lot of pressure on you now to, okay, we got to rebound, we got to get back into this sort of thing. But if you recall last year, after they lost to the Browns in week 2, I believe, week 2 or 3, they got blown out by the Browns. That was sort of a statement game for them, and I think it was week 3. They were 1-2. They win, of course, 13 straight games, or 13 straight games or maybe they were 0-2. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. They won 13 straight games to finish 14-2 on the season. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year. I have no idea. Their schedule is pretty favorable from here on out, but they have a lot of stuff to figure out. And of course, the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes was just like a video game. 385 passing yards, 4 touchdown passes. He didn't have any weaknesses at all in this game, and he just picked apart the Ravens defense and spread the ball out. That's what I was most impressed with. But really, this is a team loss. They were bad in all areas except really for special teams, where they had that kickoff return for a touchdown. That was really the only big play they had all game. They just gave up a lot of big plays on defense, and on offense, when they fall behind, it's hard for them to get back in the game. We've seen that. We saw that last year against Tennessee in the playoffs. We've seen that before, but this was a different beast. You have to come with your A+++ game when you play the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Ravens just didn't. It was disappointing. They started off slow. Kansas City was hot from the get-go, and really the difference was big plays. The Chiefs had a ton of them. And Patrick Mahomes he makes plays like I've never seen any other human being make. He is a video game. He's just a freak, the stuff he's able to do. And just make the defense look silly. And he really made the Ravens defense look silly yesterday. And it's back to the drawing board. The Chiefs, I think, are the team to beat, not only in the AFC but in the NFL right now. I don't really see anybody. I hate to say an undefeated season, but I really don't see many teams on their schedule right now who could beat them. And Patrick Mahomes, I think he's well on his way to an MVP. It's not just the stats and the numbers, but it's the way he goes about getting those stats and numbers, Josh, like a fake jump pass, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. It's just incredible. And, I really thought the Ravens were going to play better. I think the expectation was that they would. Heck, they were the favorite. They were 3.5-point favorites in this game at home. So disappointing loss, but I think for them, I think they can bounce back. They have a pretty easy schedule the next 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. So I think they're in good shape. Of course, they have the football team next week, and that's going to be a fun one. But Kansas City is just in a league of their own, Josh. I think they're 3 or 4 rungs above any other team in the NFL right now. Talent-wise, execution-wise, on both sides of the ball, they just deliver big-time plays all the time. And they're just – you just have to sit back and admire what they're able to do. And I think everyone who's a football fan does and should. It's just insane.
Well, I think we just about covered that. I don't think I have anything else left to say, because whatever I didn't cover, I feel like you covered it. So, yeah, but the Ravens will have an easy week next week in the scrimmage against the Washington football team. They have the bye week, so Lamar gets some practice. They set up a scheduled scrimmage against the Washington football team. Their defense will get a lot of work catching passes from Dwayne Haskins, and their offense will get some work with not getting tackled and running straight to the end zone on Washington's secondary. So I'm sure you're looking forward to that one, Dan.
Yeah, we need a big blowout win after this tough loss. So, yeah, it should be fun.
After Washington's loss last week, I just have no hope that we're even going to come close to being in competition with the Baltimore Ravens. But anyways, 34-20, the Chiefs over the Ravens, as that wraps up our week 3 wrap up. We do have some nuggets for you, though, in week 3. I want to start briefly with the Green Bay Packers and New Orleans Saints in this game. I mean, an evenly matched game. I've heard a lot of people say this. I've said this last week and the week before, I think, but I want to say this again. People are saying Aaron Rodgers is regressing, and I've heard people say he won't have a great season this year. I don't know where you're getting that, because he still looks like a great darn quarterback. He threw for 283 yards and 3 touchdowns. The stats are almost identical between him and Drew Brees, and the Packers still got the job done. The Saints are under 500 at 1-2. So my quick nugget on this game is don't count Aaron Rodgers out. I don't think the Packers are getting talked about enough because the Chiefs are so much better and the Seahawks are just tearing it up. But still, look at this Packers team to make a run. I'm almost positive they'll get a playoff spot. Yeah. I think they're just going under the radar. And
that's the way they like it. That's the way Aaron Rodgers has liked it throughout his career. And especially now, you talk about the last couple of years, they've struggled to find their identity. There was a problem between Aaron Rodgers and when his former head coach was there, and apparently he doesn't like his current head coach or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But he's just a winner. I really think he needs another ring. Aaron Rodgers does, to really solidify his stature. I think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback anyway, but that would certainly help. And I think he can make the same. Drew Brees certainly has had better numbers career-wise. Of course, he's played quite a bit longer than Rodgers has. But yeah, I think you said it perfectly. The Packers are the team to beat. One of the teams to beat in the NFC. I think probably the team to beat. I think you could really make an argument between Seattle and Green Bay. So. I think obviously they're the favorite to win that division they're in, which is pretty weak. The Aaron Rodgers, he's just ridiculous, man. Almost 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Drew Brees had similar numbers, but I think the Packers just have more. First of all, the Packers have a better defense, and the Packers have more guys who can beat you deep downfield, like Allen Lazard. So, yeah, I think you covered it perfectly. I think the Packers are one of the teams to beat in the NFC, and Aaron Rodgers. I don't know how much time he has left. Father Time plays a role with all that, but he's not showing any signs of slowing down anytime soon.
My next nugget: the Philadelphia Eagles and Cincinnati Bengals tie. What a terrible game that was. It was terrible. You end up tying. And in what PFT commenter says on Twitter, the NFC Beast, the Washington football team at 1-2 lost to the Cleveland Browns. They're tied for first place with Dallas.
Yeah, just a bad division.
Show you how bad this NFC East is this year. The Eagles and the Cincinnati Bengals tie at 23. And my last and final nugget, Fitzmagic. Fitzmagic.
So weird.
8 for 20, 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, beating Jacksonville. Jacksonville's offense didn't look the best. And
no.
I know the reason why. I know the exact 100% reason why. Jay Gruden is their offensive coordinator.
Oh, man. Yeah, Fitzpatrick is such a weird character in the history of the NFL. We talked about him a few weeks ago, and he just seems to come in cycles as far as his performances are concerned, Josh. He played terribly last week. It seems like after he has a bad week, he comes out and he just plays a phenomenal game, and he played very well once again. And this game was surprising. I think a lot of people had the Jags in this game, especially being at home, playing better recently. Just a strange thing. And he was, Josh, 18 of 20. He only had 2 incompletions the entire game.
That's insane.
I mean, Fitzmagic is real for about 4 or 5 weeks total during a 16-game regular season. It's just unexplainable, honestly.
Yep, that's about all I have for Week 3 Nuggets. Last but not least, what are we looking forward to most in Week 4 of the NFL? I will start this off by saying the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City coming off a great win against the Baltimore Ravens. Their offense looked great. Their defense looked great, as I said earlier. How is Bill Belichick in the New England Patriots with a new quarterback in Cam Newton in their different styled offense gonna adapt to Kansas City? I really think it's going to be a tough test, and this will be a test for fans and watchers, fans of the game, whatever path of life you're from. I think this is a test for us to see if Bill Belichick can do great things with anybody besides Tom Brady. We've seen it before, like you said, with other quarterbacks, the backup quarterbacks when Brady got hurt, Matt Castle, like you said before. But this will be a test to see what he can do with Cam Newton and if the Patriots can come out and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. That's my one and only game I am looking out for Week 4. And hopefully there will still be football. With this Tennessee mishap, I just hope nothing bad happens with that.
I'll have a tweet for you from Adam Schefter after I give you my game to watch out for. And this is going to be a little surprising, I think, for maybe our listeners. I don't know. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing Josh Allen go against this Las Vegas Raiders defense in Vegas, coming off a really good week. The Raiders coming off a really bad week after they played decently well. I'm just interested to see how Josh Allen, first of all, how he plays on the road, how he plays against the Raiders defense, who are a pretty decent unit. And on the other side of it, I'm looking to see how the Raiders rebound. How does John Gruden get this team ready to play? Hopefully he wears a mask, but we'll see if he can get his football team ready for the Bills. It's going to be a very tough matchup for the Raiders, but don't be surprised if the Raiders are able to get an upset here. Rolling the dice, to use a Vegas term, at home, picking up a big win over the Bills. So that's my pick. I'm excited to watch some of that game, and hopefully it's a good one.
Well, this Adam Schefter news is very juicy. Would you like to read it off?
Yes. So Adam Schefter tweeted about 10 minutes ago here. It's 3:06 Eastern time, if you're keeping count. Quote, the NFL wants to and intends to play the Titans-Steelers game as scheduled Sunday. One of the contingency plans to allow for additional testing and contact tracing to occur would be to move the game to Monday night, per source. So interesting thing to keep an eye on there. Instead of playing on Sunday, of course, they'll have 2 Monday night football games, one of those being Pittsburgh and Tennessee, should they decide to make that decision.
Monday night doubleheader.
Yep, and there's a memo sent out from Roger Goodell to chief executives of the NFL and club presidents, things like that. You'll have to go check that out on Twitter. Adam Schefter sent that out. There's a lot of information in there about how the NFL is expected to handle this. And according to this memo, one of the quotes in here is, this is not unexpected. The NFL kind of had an idea this could happen. And it looks like they have protocols in place to deal with this sort of thing. So go over to Twitter, check out Adam Schefter's tweet. It's a picture of a memo that was sent around the NFL. It's got some good information in there. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we get football and we get all of it. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think the NFL is acting very swiftly because of the amount of money and viewership that's on the line.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think they had quite a while to figure this thing out. I mean, you're talking about March when we really started experiencing this stuff. The draft was in April, and we had a completely virtual draft, which was strange. So they were working on this for quite a while. That's why I think they postponed the season for as long as they did, so they could get things sorted out. So I think it's a great thing. I'm excited to see how the NFL handles this. And Adam Schefter, the memo he sent out, like I said, has a lot of good information about how they're going to handle certain protocol and things like that. The NFL, like I mentioned at the top of the show, and I think now, they had a plan in place for this. They had a feeling this could happen, and so good on them for being prepared, and hopefully everything comes out well. And of course, the health and safety of the players, Josh, is number one here, no matter who the player is, and staff as well. You're talking about coaches, executives, anyone who's involved with the teams. Hopefully their health and safety is obviously getting the full consideration here.
Absolutely, Dan. So that about wraps things up, but we're not done here. Still a lot to come on this jam-packed episode of the Kirby on Sports podcast. As always, you can find Dan on Twitter at Dan the VTman97. Dan, thanks once again for the time. Let's do it again soon, buddy.
All right, Josh, thanks for having me, man. It's always a good time being on this podcast. A high-quality one, I must admit.
I appreciate that, man.
The Kirby on Sports podcast will continue with more right after this. Thank you once again to Dan Demski for calling in earlier in that segment. Before we move on to our next segment, this is what's on tap week 4. Thursday night football, the Denver Broncos and the New York Jets. The 1 o'clock slate of games on Sunday, the Arizona Cardinals, the Carolina Panthers, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Baltimore Ravens against the Washington football team, the Cleveland Browns and the Dallas Cowboys, the New Orleans Saints and the Detroit Lions, the Minnesota Vikings and the Houston Texans, the Seattle Seahawks and the Miami Dolphins, the Los Angeles Chargers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Tennessee Titans, the Indianapolis Colts and the Chicago Bears. 4 o'clock games for you, the New York Giants against the Los Angeles Rams, the New England Patriots against the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills against the Las Vegas Raiders, the Philadelphia Eagles against the San Francisco 49ers, and the Atlanta Falcons against the Green Bay Packers on Monday night. That sets the table for you for week 4 in the NFL. Now let's switch gears to the NHL. Last night, as we recorded this, the Tampa Bay Lightning took home Lord Stanley's Cup in a very weird fashion. As you know, the NHL, geez, I got those confused, but the NHL took a brief hiatus due to COVID. They came back with a bubble and they succeeded. And this just goes to show you a bubble format during a pandemic. Pray and hope to God this will never happen again, but there will be a way that you can play sports again. The Tampa Bay Lightning over the Dallas Stars to win the Stanley Cup final. Joining us now to talk about all things NHL, the lovely Anna Knox from the Power Play Point podcast. She's been on the podcast before. Anna, thanks for the time. How have you been?
I've been good. Thanks for having me on. And I still am kind of in awe that here we are at the end of September talking about the Stanley Cup. But I watched it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was 2 really fantastic teams that didn't disappoint. That's for sure. But other than sports wise, I'm doing good. I'm kind of suffering through the virtual teaching. It's exhausting, but it's a job. And this is what we have to do.
I understand that. More power to you. So before we get into this, Anna, I don't believe we've talked at all since this bubble format or anything. I know you've been more into the NHL. Now that the NFL is around, I haven't really been watching much. I've been watching highlights. But in your opinion, what was your opinion on the bubble? Did you enjoy watching games from the bubble? What was your take on the whole bubble experience?
The whole bubbles, lots of bubbles. I think that you were spot on a couple minutes ago when you sort of applauded this bubble approach to sports. I think the NHL did it perfectly. They picked Edmonton and Toronto. You hosted, the teams. They played in rinks that they didn't have to travel. They were in hotels. I know that it was, it's hard to be away from your family, but I know that the staff at the hotel made each player's room a little bit more family friendly, with their family not being there, but with pictures of, say, if they had kids or a wife or a girlfriend or whomever is important in their life. And I thought that was very cool. And, the players social distanced and they had great food and everyone, they had an opportunity to be outside. So I think the NHL has set the bar high, and I think all sports should follow it, because we certainly saw what happened with baseball. And then, like you said, with the Titans coming out with that news.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just goes to show you, like I said earlier, this worked. So,
yeah.
Gameplay from the bubble, before we get into how each team got to where they are, who'd you like? I know it was sort of different because the teams were coming off a long break. Did you see anybody you thought could have made it to the Stanley Cup, or other teams you thought, man, they just aren't doing so well?
Gosh, that's a great question. Well, I will say from the beginning, I had a soft spot for Dallas, even prior to this Stanley Cup series last night, or the last 6 games. Something about that team that just they just earned it. I really felt like that was a team that, like, this was their year, and they were kind of showing it to everybody, and that was great to see. Who I didn't want to see was the Knights, and I'm glad that they were bumped out. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe I just became a Stars fan because I'm so against the Las Vegas Knights. But I just think, overall, the 2 teams that played deserved it, and I think it was impressive hockey. It was just some really outstanding games and plays and just everything. So I guess I will just say, I had that soft spot for Dallas. Of course, when you see a JB go on ice and you think he may make it, and it doesn't happen, it's like close. But no, I don't think I really had. Once the Capitals were out, it's always hard to find another team to say follow. But if you appreciate the sport like anything, you may have that second or third team. So I was kind of pulling for Dallas from the beginning.
Yeah, and Dallas almost took the win in the Stanley Cup. Just I've seen highlights, and it was just so closely contested. So let's just get through how each team got to where they are. Starting with Dallas, they were in the first round. They won the series 4-2 over Calgary. And what's different about this NHL playoff format, they reseeded after. So then they went 4-3 over Colorado, the Colorado Avalanche, and then just dominated against the Las Vegas Golden Knights to make it to the Stanley Cup final. Vegas, last time they were in the Cup was 2018 against the Washington Capitals. You look at Tampa Bay, the 4-1 over Columbus, then they get reseeded. Another 4-1 over the Boston Bruins, then 4-2 over the New York Islanders. Just want to do a quick segue. The Islanders looked really, really, really good in this series. Barry Trotz, the Islanders, I mean, they just looked really impressive, and I really thought they had a chance to make it all the way to the Stanley Cup final.
I did too. I think that I'm not an Islanders fan, so I can say I was not pulling for them. Just, I don't know. I mean, yes, Barry Trotz, former coach and whatever, but there's something about the Islanders team I couldn't back up. Tampa Bay I could, even though we had our, issues in 2018 with them. But I think the teams looking forward are going to be 100% the Islanders, the Avalanche. I mean, definitely the Stars and the Caps. I think that's going to be 4 teams come next season that are just going to come out and just be ready to go.
Absolutely. So in that series, the Lightning and the Stars, the Lightning beat the Dallas Stars 4-2 in this series. Like I said, I thought it was closely contested. Game 1, Dallas routed out Tampa Bay 4-1. Then Tampa Bay comes back 3-2 in game 2. And then game 3 and 4 were the big difference makers. Tampa Bay 5-2 over Dallas to dig a deeper hole for Dallas. Then in overtime, Tampa Bay 5-4. Fighting off elimination, though, in the second overtime in game 5, Dallas beats Tampa Bay 3-2. But then in game 6, it's lights out 2-0. So
yeah,
gameplay looked really good from what I've seen from highlights. What did you like about the Stanley Cup Finals as a whole?
As a whole, I think what I thoroughly enjoyed was that you had 2 teams that were going to give 100, if not 110%, give you 60 minutes of hockey and then some, especially with a overtime and a double overtime in back-to-back games. Like, you have to be so tired, but no team was going to stop. And I think that both goalies Vasilevsky and Khudobin have to be just nothing but respect for both of them. You know, they played hard. Some of the saves were incredible. And I think that it was, you know, it was just great to see. And there was not a lot of fighting, which is always a good thing because, you know, we saw it with the Knights. And to me that, you know, when it comes down to the Stanley Cup, the less time in the penalty box for fighting or for, you know, tripping or something really stupid, the better, because you're on it, you know, to be on the ice and to play smart hockey, not, you know, drop the gloves just because someone's taunting you. So I think both teams showed just a great passion and skill. And I think I just loved, I love the Khudobin story. I just something about him and you know, coming double overtime and he gets 39 out of 41 saves back to back. Like, I can't even imagine what his body's going through. And I will say, being a Bay Area girl, I do follow the Sharks. So I was pulling for Joe Pavelski. I'd like to see, you know, because he played 13 years with the Sharks, didn't get the cup, and it was like traded, and it was this big deal in the Bay Area, and then came to Dallas and was good, but he really shined. I think he had 7 or 8 goals in this series alone, which was like, oh, that's just amazing. Him and Corey Perry. Then the two kind of older guys are like 35 and 36. You know, they want the cup, they want what's best, but they're making plays out there, blocking shots, and Corey Perry scores in the second overtime, you know, gets the goal. And I think it was just fun to watch. And I think I walked away kind of feeling, I would have felt, you know, the same feeling, you know, if Dallas had won. I think both teams earned it. And I will say on the Tampa Bay end of things, I admire the fact that, you know, Stamkos, their captain who's been out forever, it feels like, made an appearance, only played less than 3 minutes and scored. So there's another guy, like, who knows what kind of pain he was in, considering he didn't play the next couple of games. But that to me is, you know, there's another respect for an athlete who wants to give it his all for, you know, for himself, for the team, and for the fans who are still watching. You know, like, there's a whole bunch of us out there that watch this, regardless if there was anybody in the stands or not.
Did you find the Stanley Cup weird at all with there being nobody in the stands? Because when I look at things, I feel like half the Stanley Cup is the rowdy crowd and the fans, the crowd noise. Did you find that different watching a game on TV with no fans, no crowd noise, anything like that?
I will say in the first couple of bubble games, yes. I found it very odd, and I think it was finding it odd for watching in the couch, but then also watching the commentators not completely sure, you know, like, what's going on here, kind of, you know, they're trying to make the most of it, and definitely that first couple of games in the very, very beginning of the bubble, it was awkward, and I think what started to make it better was when they've started to play a little bit more music and a little bit more crowd sound effect, even though it's not the same, but it is something to kind of get, you know, players a little bit motivated. Because I think, you know, in the beginning when they were giving like a Tuukka Rask such a hard time for leaving, you know, and he just said it was really hard, you know, aside from the family issues, that's his own thing, but also being completely honest that it was really hard to kind of get his head into the game because there were not the fans and that, you know, adrenaline going. Yeah, in the beginning it was, but then I got used to it and it didn't really bother me as much.
So the Tampa Bay Lightning over the Dallas Stars to win the 2020 Stanley Cup. We still don't know when there will be an NHL game next season, which is really surprising to me. Hopefully it will come back really soon.
I think the earliest I heard was December.
December.
So, Yeah, I mean, they still have, a couple of important dates coming up in regards to people's contracts and all that good stuff. But then, you figure you have, we have a new coach and we have, changes, and they need to get back on the ice, and they have to figure out how they're going to do. Are they going to stick with the bubble mentality, which at some point they said they would do East Coast and a West Coast, and keep things that way. But that's also what they said prior to picking, Toronto and Edmonton for the beginning of the bubble. But I think that they also chose wisely, because Canada's COVID numbers are luckily nothing near the US's. So I think that'll be interesting to see how they're going to come forward with. Are we, because we didn't see a whole lot of positivity with Major League Baseball. And now that we're starting to see some of the NFL players testing positive, I don't know what that's going to do for NHL, because they play so much more frequently. Like they have like 82 games in a season. So is that going to change the dynamic of, like really just like the geography? Are they going to, do an East Coast, West Coast? Are they going to do, Metro and however they're going to figure it out? But I think the earliest we could ever hear of anything would be December, and that would just be fingers crossed.
Hopefully we'll get hockey back. Another point here in the Stanley Cup I want to talk about, the Capitals unfortunately were eliminated by Barry Trotz, and the Islanders then soon after fired their head coach Todd Reirden. Anna, I know you have a lot to talk about with their new head coach Peter Laviolette. Before we get into that, though, some people made the argument that this wasn't really a fair assessment on letting Todd Reirden go after taking a long break from COVID. I know now it's done and he's gone, but what were your thoughts? Do you think Reirden should have went after that first round exit from the Capitals?
That's a good question. I have been in many conversations about coaching situations, and I'm definitely a black sheep in it. I feel like oftentimes when a team is not doing well, the first, finger pointed and the first person to go is the coach. And I feel differently, because I feel like, the coach is part of it, but so are the players. We're dealing with grown men who have been doing this sport probably their whole life. And if a coach is there to motivate them, great, but they need to get that, mentality and what do you call it? Like, sportsmanship, whatever, with their teammates. So I feel like, everyone wants to point and be like, oh, John Carlson, didn't get the Norris Trophy because of this and that. It's like, well, no, he started off with a great season and it just, kind of teetered there towards the end. That's on him. So I feel kind of differently. I feel like I was good with Reirden coming in after Trotz left, because he had been with the team for a couple years and he had worked closely with Trotz. But like everyone has said, they're, look at his and it's like you can't look at his experience and compare it to Barry Trotz. You have like someone who's been a head coach for 16 years, and then Trotz gets the Stanley Cup. You can't compare it to Todd Reirden as like his second season. And I also didn't think it was fair that they other people were saying like he just stands there, he doesn't have any fire, he doesn't have any this, and no, but we don't know what he does in the locker room. We don't know if he throws a chair or like has some like Bobby Knight moment or something. I don't know. None of us were ever part of that, and unfortunately we're not going to, because he is back with his former team. So sorry to see him go, but of all the choices that we had, I'm glad that we have Lavi for sure.
Yeah, so Peter Laviolette, a pretty impressive resume, has been in the Stanley Cup with a ton of different teams, has won a couple cups with different teams as well. I really think this could be a shot with his resume on paper. It looks like we have the right coach here. Give me your thoughts on the new hire with Peter Laviolette.
I like it. I will say in the beginning when they were throwing out Babcock's name, I think that was the one that I thought, oh, hell no, please. I don't, certain coaches just get under your skin, and he didn't have a DC vibe to me. I didn't see him coaching the other players well, but this guy I have an opportunity to see interviewed a handful of times, and I felt like the one that really stuck with me was he spoke to a woman, sportscaster in DC, who was asking him just, kind of more personal questions and, what he was looking forward to DC and things like that. And then the conversation turned to the Capitals, and he was almost just sort of starstruck by Ovechkin, and had like, I can't believe I get, the honor of coaching, the grade 8. And I think it was so genuine, and it was so cool to hear. And the fact that they had a conversation, and they both, just had just absolute respect for each other, and they had the same goal in mind. What a great way to start off the season, and I feel like, if your captain's going to be on board and feeling good about the coach, that is only going to spread in the locker room to all the teammates that look up to him.
Yeah, seeing Peter Laviolette coming into the Capitals organization sort of left off on a bad note with Todd Reirden, but trying to make things better with the Capitals. Do you think he will fit in well with that elite cap squad in Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, and other veterans to the team?
I do. And I feel that way because he is, he's a veteran coach himself. He has, like you said, he's won 2 cups with 2 separate teams. He has a hot streak to him, but certainly not like Tortorelli, where you're like, okay, Torts, your head's gonna explode, buddy. Like, just relax. I feel like he's going to be good. I think he's going to listen to the players, and I think that they're going to listen to him, which seemed to be what was lacking with Todd Reirden. Was someone had pointed out to me, and I never really thought about it, was that he seemed more like a teammate, Todd Reirden, rather than an authoritative like figure to these players, like, more of a friend than a coach. So maybe, coming in, like, this is how it's going to be. And I think it's going to be interesting also to see who the defensive coaches will be when they come in, and how that's all going to work, because obviously last year it just wasn't there. I felt differently, but whatever.
It's going to be really interesting to see from the Capitals and the rest of the teams in the NHL on when this season will get started for next year. Still no timetable on when the NHL will return, but for the time being, the Tampa Bay Lightning has won and is holding the cup that the Caps won in 2018. Always remember that, ladies and gentlemen. That's about all the time we have here. Anna, thanks so much for calling in again. We always appreciate it.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Anytime. And yeah, let's see who's going to win that Niners-Eagles game. My Niners.
Yeah, talking NFL. I guess you left me no choice. Jimmy G, the half the Niners crew is out with injuries.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Oh, it was absolutely insane. My 2 brother-in-laws are always pushing for me to be in their football pool, and every year I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. And every year I get suckered into it. And I thought, okay, this first week is fantastic. And then I wake up the next morning from text messages from both of them of just like, 3 Niner injuries, and then now this person's out. And I thought, oh my God, this is only week 1. This is only week 1.
You got Bosa, Mostert, Garoppolo, and so many more. Bosa's out for the year. Garoppolo, high ankle sprain. Mostert, who knows when he'll be back. But I feel for the Niners.
Yeah, it wasn't a good start. So we'll see what happens. Unfortunately, it's one of those, like, do you pull for your team, or do you pull for who's going to help you win the pool? So
Yep, that's always one thing you have to look at. But Anna, thanks so much for the time once again. We'll wrap things up right after this on the Kirby on Sports podcast. Once again, thanks for the time, Anna Knox. The Tampa Bay Lightning win the Stanley Cup final, and that's about all we have for our Week 3 recap and the Stanley Cup final. Make sure you tune in for much more content on the way, coming soon. But until then, I am Josh Kirby with the Kirby on Sports podcast. As always, you can find us on all streaming platforms. Anchor.fm/the Kirby on Sports podcast. Make sure you check us out on all social media platforms as well. Just type in the Kirby on Sports podcast. Thanks once again to Regroup Building Services and PM Plus Reserves for sponsoring this podcast. And special thanks out to MPT Now Productions, Dave Johnson, and Productions by Quet. Until the next episode, continue to always create greatness, and we will see you soon. Peace.